All right, let's get into APIs. Welcome to this section. Really quick, I just want to explore with you what an API is because whenever you look up the definition, it just simply says an application programming interface is for two or more computers uh, to communicate with each other. Okay, it's a type of software interface offering service to other pieces of software. Blah 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 blah. At what point during this definition or this definition? Um, or this definition, does that actually explain what it is? So I'm here to explain to you what an API is before we get started. And this is going to be relevant not just to what we'll do in this course, but whenever you're learning about security or the cloud or anything, APIs are very heavily used. So let's get to it real quick. Listen, an API is a way that two different systems or two different kinds of applications, mainly web applications, can communicate with each other. Why? Because an API is simply, or an API endpoint is a server somewhere, basically a website, and we send a request for it. And instead of getting HTML, like we get here whenever I right click and go to view page source, this is what we get when we make a request to a web page. This is what we get when we make a request to an API endpoint. Notice it's just a URL, and we get back some data that looks kind of like key value pairs. This right here is known as JSON, but it's the same format as a Python dictionary. So, in essence, we're going to be making a request to different types of URLs, and we are going to get back a dictionary, or we're going to at least convert it into a dictionary very simply so that we can use that data for whatever we want to. All right, everybody. So in order to make a request to an API endpoint, otherwise known as just a URL or a website, we are not going to hand code this, obviously. We went over importing in the last section for a reason, and this is why. So we're going to import the requests library or the requests package that's going to do all of the hard work for us. So here's what we need to first of all do. We need to import requests. So here's what we do. Now, if we make a request, we're going to get a response. And in order to get that response and do something with it, we need to save it in a variable. So we're going to simply say response, but we can't use that. So we're just going to say r equals requests dot get. Okay. And right now we'll do https / www.google.com. And then we are just going to print R. Okay. So let's see what happens here. I'm going to, there we go. All right, sorry about that. So for this, it looks like you need to really make sure that, so we were previously doing run Python file, but we actually need to just do run code here. So if I do run code, I get a response 200. So if I just type in response dot text and I just save and I run it again, I get HTML back, right? So this is all we're going to do, except for whenever we request from a specific kind of URL, we are going to get back JSON, and JSON I'll go over in the next video. All right, so for this video and the rest of this course, I'm going to be using api.chucknorris.io, and this is an API that every time you query this, for instance, it will give you a random joke in the form of JSON. So really quickly, let's copy. The first thing we're going to do, of course, is this is saying how to use it. The first part about consuming an API is, really learning how exactly, like what URLs get you what and what the data format is so you know how to filter the data. So I just copied this. Again, I'll do that visually, copy that. And instead of google.com, we are going to Control V right there and paste that here. So now let's see what happens if I just print out r.text. So let me clear output. and I'm going to make my request now, and I have all of this data. So that looks like it was successful. Now, I'm going to print out the type. If I print out the type, and I do this one more time, it says that this is a string. And the problem with the string is you can't really filter this based on a string, but we can filter dictionaries. So the JSON comes back, but it's in the form of a string when it comes back. Just like HTML, we would get back the type would be a string. So here's what we actually need to do. Um, Instead of r.text, we're going to import another library, and this will, I'll show you what it does. I'm going to say import JSON, JSON, and what this is going to do is going to turn this string into a dictionary. I'll show you that that's the truth. And here's how we do it. It's very simple. So it's going to simply be r.json, and it's a function. That function takes this response in, and it will turn it into JSON. So if I do the same thing, if I make another request, it looks the same. It looks exactly the same pretty much, except for you can notice the double quotes went to single quotes. But if I take this and I say, well, let me make sure that type has changed, okay? I'm going to make another request, and the class is now a dictionary. So now we can actually filter things, which we're going to do in the next video. But JSON is very important for this because otherwise you would have to somehow manually code turning a string into JSON, which would be very difficult. All right, everybody. So now we know how everything kind of works. We've already got it. So here's what we need to do. We need to figure out what our desired output is going to be. And then we need to figure out how to take things from this JSON, and we need to get out only the information that we need. And this is a very simplified version. We're going to do one more complicated version. So I'm going to Control S to print this out again, and we're going to take a look, and it looks just like there's no embedding here, which is why I chose this for the first example. It's just key value over and over. So the joke, Chuck Norris is immortal because death is hiding from him, right? This is under value, okay? So what we can do is two different things. We can save this in here to be simple, which we're going to do. So I'm going to Control X, and I am going to say r equals r.json. So now that now r holds this information in the format we need in order to manipulate it. And let's say I am wanting this value. Well, here's what we can do. If we're wanting to make our own little message, I can just say, for instance, I will say r, which is the whole response.json. Remember that. And it's a dictionary now. So if I want value, I'm just going to do square brackets and then say value. Okay. I'm going to say, let's see, what is this? Punchline equals, right? So now I can say F, and then I will say, I have a good joke for you. And then we can do the punchline. Okay. So now we're printing this out. I'm going to make my request. And it says, I have a good joke for you. Chuck Norris can dribble 2 bowling balls up a flight of stairs with his feet. So you see what I mean? So we're getting from all of this, we're getting this from someone else. We're getting this from an API endpoint, from another website that they've done a lot of hard work. They have a database, they are querying the database, so on and so forth. Okay. So if we go back to the documentation, it looks like we can do multiple things. So let's say that this wasn't random. We can specify the category by doing this. So how would we do this then? We could do it programmatically, but we could also list out all of these and then have the user choose one. So In order to simulate that because of time and because it's not really necessary at this point, just keep in mind that you can change this URL in here. So if I do, sorry about that, if I do the question mark and then I do category equals, I can put an F here for an F string, and I can have some kind of variable here. So if we look again at this, it is, you have to make sure it's correct. Question mark category equals and then this. So if we go back to Visual Studio Code and we can say desired, or actually we'll just say category equals, and then we will say, let's see, what were our choices here? Our choices, we'll say money. Okay. So money. Let's go back here and we will say money category. Sorry about that. Let's do this one more time. And look, I have a good joke for you. Body armor. Here's money. So I think that's all for the simple version. All right, everybody. In this video, we're going to do a complex example of an API request. And there are a couple of reasons why I'm doing this. One, it's a little bit more complicated documentation than the previous video. And also, it's really it's a lot more complicated to get the data that you would want out of this. So really quickly, as a base code, the code that I have my import request in JSON. I have this ready to go to get my response. And then this r.json, response.json that we're going to print out so that we can figure out how it is that we are going to extract the data that we want. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a process, which is why I saved a lot of the time for this course for this particular video, because I'm dealing with an API that I have never dealt with before. So I'm going through this just like you. Okay, so taking a look, I'm using the cocktaildb.com. I will have this in the resources so that you can go directly to it. Also in the resources, I have placed a GitHub that has a link that has links for over 100 APIs that are free, a ton of APIs. So you can go and practice this yourself. And that's, in fact, what I'll suggest to do as an assignment. So let's see what we have here. So we can go to search by name. We can search. You know what? That's the most interesting. So let's take this really quick, and I'll show you the basics of how you should structure this. There's a process to doing this. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to say base URL equals and then www dot. And I think that we might want to just do that. So here we know from this documentation here that this last word, this is all we're going to pass in. So we're of course going to allow the user, okay, to enter in something. So let's do that next. I'm going to say query equals input, and please enter a drink to search. Okay, and Control S, and then we will say in here we will simply say base URL, base URL, okay? And then we would just simply do query. So that way it should go, whatever we type in here will be right there, and we're kind of building this, okay? And really quick, so for this, especially if you are in Windows, the VS Code has a little issue here. So if you try to just run code, then you won't be able to enter something in for input. And then if you do run Python file, then it won't allow you to use the request library for some reason. It's just something wrong with VS Code. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something I should have shown you to begin with, is we are going to run this ourselves from the terminal. So I'm in the same directory as this, and this is example.py. So I'm simply going to say Python example.py, and now I can enter a drink. So I'm going to say margarita, and then we get all of this back. Okay, so this looks very complicated. So what am I going to do if I don't like this, right? Like who wants to try to read what this is? So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take this URL, or actually that was the example URL. So I'm going to take this URL like this. I'm going to pop it in the address bar and we're going to take a quick look. We have drinks. So this is a dictionary. It has a key of drinks and it appears to have a list of drinks. Okay. So we're going to say response, right? .json and we're going to save that. And then we're going to say drinks as a key. And then we're going to do an index. Okay. So let's try that really quick in our code. I'm going to say, and let's save this, result equals r.json. And then here I will say result and then drinks. Actually, we'll do this. We know it's going to be under drinks. So I'll put drinks here as the key. And then I will say, so we have all the results and then I have drinks. Now I will simply go 0. And let's see what we get if we do this. Let's run the Python file. Margarita. And here we get now we get what we need. So here it has a drink ID and string and margarita. Okay, so here this is again, now we have access to a dictionary. Now we just have key value, key value, key value. And this is what you're looking for. So all you need to do is pick out some keys that you want. str instructions. And I will say instructions equals, and then I'll say result 0, and then I will say str instructions. Okay. And here I will say an f string instructions, and then I'll say instructions just to kind of do this. We'll run the Python file. I'll say margarita. And so what I get here is the instructions and then just the instructions. So we have some success. So you see how complicated this can get. Okay, so this is a slow process that you have to have a method behind it that I've just went over. Because if we wrote all of this out, we would do r.json, okay, and then we would have to do drinks, and then we would have to do 0, and then we would have to do str instructions. This is ridiculous. So you need to break this down into smaller things because if you want multiple different key value pairs when you finally drill down to what you need, then you're not going to want to do this a bunch. You're going to want to be able to just say result 0 or save result 0 as the new result. Okay, so that's all for this video, and I'll do a nice little outro video for everybody in the next video.